Back when Gideon Optics first came on the scene a few years ago, they only had a handful of dots. They had the Alpha, they had the Omega, and the Mediator. But Gideon needed a dot with the RMSC footprint, and that's when they came out with this awesome little optic right here. This is the Gideon Optics Judge. Now the downside to the Judge was it had one major flaw, and that was the fact it had a bottom load battery. And we all know the downside to a bottom load battery means every time the battery dies or you have to replace the battery, you have to remove the optic from the slide, replace the battery, remount the optic, and chances are you are also going to have to re-zero the optic. Well, not only did Gideon Optics fix that issue, they also did a complete makeover on the Judge. And now we have this badass little optic right here, the Judge 2. Let's head over to the other bench and check it out. We're over on the other bench. Let's go over the packaging real quick. So there is the top of your box and your sides. And then on this side, this has all your specs. And on every Gideon Optics red dot or green dot, it will show you right here if it is the red version or the green version. And this is the red dot version. All right, the box top just lifts off. Got your instruction manual. There is that side. I really like that they do this. That's your torque specs when you mount the optic on whatever you're going to put it on. And there is the back of your manual. You have a lens cleaning cloth. Here is our optic. It is inside of a plastic bag. We're going to set that off to the side and come back to that in a bit. And here are all the different mounting screws. Looks like we've got about 5 different pairs of screws. Nice little touch. We have our Torx wrench and a flathead screwdriver. This is where the battery goes, but I've already got the battery installed, and that is everything in the box. All right, here is our optic. Now right now it is mounted on a adapter for a 1913 rail, so you can put this on an AR, shotgun, anything with a 1913 or Picatinny rail. Here is the top of the optic, the front, and the back. Alright, I've got our Judge 2 off of the Picatinny adapter. Let's go over some quick specs on this. This has an overall length of 48.8 millimeters. It is 27.4 millimeters wide and 28 millimeters tall. And this only weighs 1.2 ounces. Alright, I've got the dot turned on and I've got it turned all the way up. Now this is a 3 MOA red dot and it is plenty bright. I am getting a little bit of star bursting, but that is not an issue with the dot. That is because I have astigmatism. But all in all, I am pretty happy with that. Alright, so the Judge 2 does have the RMSC footprint. Now it does not have a backup iron sight built into the optic, which I would have liked to seen, but due to the fact that the base on this is only 8.5 millimeters tall, you should not have any issue co-witnessing your iron sights, especially if you have a little bit taller sights or suppressor height sights. Now our lens on this is a 20 by 18 millimeter lens. It is a coated lens. This does have an aircraft grade aluminum housing, and it is waterproof and shockproof. Now the Judge 2 does have a side load battery. This runs on a CR1632 battery. Now as far as the website goes, there is nothing on how long the battery will last in this optic, but it does have shake awake. It will shut down after 225 seconds of no movement. As soon as you tap the optic or pick up whatever it is mounted on, it will turn back on. So due to the fact that it has shake awake, battery life should not be an issue. Just change your battery out once a year. That's what I do with my optics. Now we will be testing the shake awake on this optic later on in the video. Now your brightness level adjustments are here on this side. You have your up arrow here and your down arrow here. Now they do not have the brightness levels listed on the website either, but from what I can tell, this has 10 brightness levels. 8 of those are daytime settings. 2 of those are for NV. Now as you can see with this optic, it is pretty rugged. The glass is sitting way back inside of the housing, which is a good thing, and it's got a pretty beefy housing all the way around. Now on the back of the housing we have some serrations here. There is a little arrow pointing down, but all in all this is a pretty rugged built optic. And later on in the video, I am going to show you a comparison between the original Judge and this Judge 2. Alright, the last thing I want to do with this optic is I always like to test the windage and elevation to see how tactile and audible they are. So let's check the windage first. Oh, very nice. Very nice clicks. They are audible. Let's check the elevation. Same with the elevation. Very nice. Alright, the last thing I want to throw in before we go get this mounted up on the Nocturne F and head out to the range to do the review. This does come with Gideon Optics lifetime warranty. And if you are interested in picking up one of these Judge 2s, you can head to my website, scroll down to the weekly deals section, and there is always a link there to Gideon Optics. And there might even be a code there to save you a little bit of your hard-earned cash. Now I mounted the optic up the night before on the CZ Nocturne F. I used a little bit of blue Loctite on the screws and on the battery door screw. I torqued the optic down to the slide with 15 inch-pounds. And when I got to the range, I put a fresh coat of paint on the steel target. And this hardly ever happens, but I fired the first shot and it was dead center in the middle of the steel target at 15 yards. So I actually did not have to zero this optic. Alright, our first target, we got all alphas. We did have a miss on this piece of steel. Alright, our next target, we've got all alphas and 2 Charlie. I'm going to make an adjustment on that dot a little bit to the left. Alright, our next target, we got a really nice group here, but we're definitely going to have to make an adjustment to the dot. We've got all alphas and 1 Charlie. We got all our hits on steel. And our next target, we got all alphas and 1 Charlie. Now I was also filming the very first shots with the CZ Nocturne F, and I was struggling a little bit getting used to this pistol. Now I got all the targets pasted up, got the steel painted, loaded up a couple more mags, and this time around I shot a little bit better. Now one thing I noticed right away when I got this outside was during the unboxing video we were getting a little bit of starbursting with the optic, but once I got it outside, and even though I had it turned all the way up, the dot was pretty crisp and definitely one of the better dots that I've seen when it comes to starbursting. Alright, our first target, we got 3 alpha, 1 Charlie. I thought we had a miss on the steel, but we clipped it right there. Next target, we got all alphas. And the next target, we got all alphas. We got all our hits on steel. And our last target, we got all alphas. Now the glass quality on the Judge 2 is great. just like on any other Gideon optic. I'm not getting that blue tint like I do with some other optics, so no complaints when it comes to the glass. Now the optic is obviously very narrow due to the fact it is an RMSC footprint dot, but I was not having any issues transitioning from target to target. Now we already talked about that the biggest upgrade to this optic was the fact that they ended up going to a side load battery tray versus the bottom load battery on the original Judge. But the next big upgrade to this optic is how rugged they made the housing on this. Now one of my favorite things about it is the glass sits back really far inside the housing. But if we look here at the front, they tapered the top forward, which is giving you even more protection for the glass on the optic. But this is also going to double as a sunshade to kind of cut down on that glare, especially if that sun is out in front of you, right above you. Having the top of that optic tapering forward like that is definitely going to cut down on that glare. Now the next awesome upgrade on this optic is here on the back. They've got some really nice serrations all the way around the back of the housing, which is also going to cut down on some of that glare. And it also kind of makes sense that Mike did this to the back of this optic due to the fact that most of the guns that you get today, the rear sights all have serrations in them to cut down on the glare. So all these added little details that they've done to this optic, once you put them all together, it just makes for a great design. Now as the day went on and I kept getting more rounds downrange and getting more rounds racked up on this optic, I was also noticing that the front glass was staying pretty clean. By the end of the day filming, I pretty much had racked up about 400 rounds on the optic due to the fact that we were not only doing the review on the optic, but we were also doing the first shots video on the Nocturne F. And I never had to clean the optic throughout the day. In fact, I didn't clean the optic till I got the gun home and cleaned the gun. Now the next thing I want to talk about, being that this optic is very narrow and RMSC footprint, this optic is obviously going to go on a lot of compact and subcompact pistols, which probably means a lot of people will be using this optic on their carry gun. And that leads into the button design on this optic. Now the way the buttons are set up on this optic down at the bottom, the very top of the housing kind of protrudes out a little bit over the top of those buttons, and those buttons are recessed in just a little bit, but you can still feel the up and down arrows, which is going to make it very easy to adjust that brightness level up and down. But with those being recessed back in, this is not going to cause an issue while you're carrying the gun or having the gun in the holster, having to worry about bumping those buttons and adjusting that brightness level all the way down to where you can't see it, or adjusting up all the way to the top end of the brightness where it's just too bright for you. So they did a really good job with the brightness level adjustment buttons on this Judge too. Now we talked about at the beginning of the video that I did not have to zero this optic. I just mounted it on the slide, and when I took the first shot, we were dead center on the steel plate at 15 yards. And throughout the whole entire day, filming this review and filming the Nocturne F first shots video, we never lost zero. I had no dot flicker, just no problems at all with the dot. So I was very happy with the performance by the end of the day filming. Now I did say at the beginning of the video while we were doing the unboxing that I was going to let you know if the Shake Awake works, and I'm happy to say that the Shake Awake works just fine. And I know I've said it before in other videos, but now we are testing the Shake Awake when we get home from the range after getting a few hundred rounds racked up on an optic, because it's just a better test after the dot's been getting bounced around on a slide all day to make sure that the Shake Awake still works. So the last thing that I wanted to do before I wrapped up filming was I wanted to shoot some 10-shot groups, because like I said, it was my first time shooting this Nocturne F and the first time using the Judge 2. And even though they weren't the best 10-shot groups I'd shot, I definitely started shooting the pistol better towards the end of the day. And it was definitely a big improvement from when we first started in the morning. So we've pretty much already went over all the pros of this optic in this video. And Gideon Optics has been around long enough now that we already know these dots are proven. People are using them in competition. People are using them for carry. I've done both, and I think it's pretty much safe to say that Gideon is here to stay for the long haul. So the next question is, do I have any cons with this optic? And I've only got one con, and that is the fact that they just did not put a backup rear sight on the optic. Now, for me, with this CZ Nocturne F and a lot of other guns you're going to put it on, the deck height on this is so short that pretty much any of your taller sights or suppressor height sights are going to co-witness anyway, and you're not going to need that. But I do have some guns that I have the original Judge mounted on that when you take the cover plate off to mount an optic, you lose the rear sight. And that's the only reason I bring that up. That's why it would have been nice to have a backup iron sight built in to the Judge too. But other than that, everything with this optic is 100% positive, except for that one ding with not having that backup rear sight. So what do I think this dot is good for? Well, obviously it's going to be a great option for any gun that you have that has the RMSC footprint, but they have built this dot so rugged and they have so much protection around that glass that I honestly think this is going to be a great carry option if you have a gun that you carry that has the RMSC footprint. So that's all I got for you. I absolutely love this dot. I think they did a fantastic job on this design. And if you want one of these optics for yourself, well, you can head to my website, go to the weekly deals section. There is always a link to Gideon Optics on my website. And if you use the code the740, you will get a nice discount to save yourself some of your hard-earned cash. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.